In late December, all you need to talk about is the deals that are going to convert in December. You don't need to talk about last week's highlights and lowlights. All that rep is thinking about is the 3 deals that he or she has dated December 31st, which, by the way, don't date them December 31st. Date them December 17th. That's the Friday before Christmas. But yeah, they're focused on those deals, and you need to ask them why those deals might not close. If it's that late in the year, you do need to have the approach of what risk still exists.
I'm Devin Reed.
And I'm Sheena Badani.
And you're watching Reveal, the revenue intelligence podcast powered by Gong.
Keep watching here to see the full interview. Or if you like to listen to podcasts on the go, check out the links in the description below.
And if you like what you hear, subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, or all of them. Why not? And while you're there, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. We personally read every single one, and I think I speak for both of us when I say they mean the world to us.
Could not agree more, Devin. Now, without further ado, here's the episode you've been waiting for.
Mark, I am thrilled to have you on the show. It had been years since we last connected before the show, so I'm glad that we've reunited.
Same here. Good to see you in a very different place than our original meeting.
Which leads me to the the unscripted question I'm actually going to open with is, do you remember when and where we first met a few years back?
I do. We were really big deals working a really tiny conference in the basement of a terrible hotel in San Francisco. And I remember Gong and Ambition having little fold-out tables next to each other. And there wasn't a whole lot of activity at that conference. So what do? You just like wander over to the table next to you and hope that that guy or girl is working a similar deal that you are, so you can like trade notes and try to figure out if you're the priority or he is. And I wandered over to the Gong table, and there you were.
Yep, we were just hanging out, it's funny because it was like one of those dark, dingy rooms that you're like excited to get to the conference, and you open the doors and you kind of see what you're working with, and you're like, this is not going to be a super fun day, is it? But you got to earn your stripes and work your way up, and sure enough, Gong and Ambition has done that. I remember it fondly. I'm like, hey, at least I don't know if Mark's buying from me, but I got a cool guy I can talk to.
I remember when I first saw that you got your current role, or maybe the role before, whatever, it wasn't an AE role, and I was like, wait a second. That was the dude that I met at the conference, and we were, spitting deals. I didn't know he had left sales, so it's funny how things change over the years, but pretty cool that we're here now.
Absolutely, and we are here today to talk about how to close out the year with Finishline coaching. So we were talking in the prep call what would make most sense given our audience and your expertise, and this came up pretty quickly. So to break the ice some more, even though I think it's melted, I like this quote that's on your LinkedIn. So it says, quote, "I lead a high-performing, straight-shooting sales team full of A-plus people." I love the word choice there, by the way, which made me wonder, what have you learned about coaching teams of A players over the years?
Yeah, the first thing about coaching a team of A players is you have to get out of the way. If you hire good people, especially in a stage like Gong or Ambition where it's growing really quickly, and sure, you're giving them some guidelines on what right looks like, but you're hiring people. Every time you hire, you're trying to level up who you bring in. And when you bring in A players, you have to trust that they're bringing something to the table that you, as the leader, may not. So how do you give them the tools to be successful, but at the same time step aside and let them run a little bit? And so the first thing about coaching an A player is learning how to humble yourself and allow them to figure out what right looks like inside of what is your ever evolving process. The second thing on an A player that I've certainly learned is they very much value their development. I think there's a misconception that, the A player just wants to run free and never talk to their boss and hero sell every deal. My experience is your A player, if they're going to consider leaving, they're not going to consider leaving for more money. They're going to consider leaving because they can get developed further. They're the continuous learner who is trying to break your system to improve your system. And if they feel like they can go somewhere else and learn from someone else, that is a threat. So as a leader, you have to be self-aware enough to know, okay, can I continue to develop this person in said area? Or can I find outside ways to get them development, continue to pour into them, and keep them at the top of their game?
We just had a conversation with the CRO of BMC. Sheena, are your ears ringing? Because it was like the exact same thing. We're talking about retaining talent. And he's like, they're not going to leave for money. They're going to leave, what they say, like, people don't quit their job. They quit their manager. So very, you're in great company, and definitely a theme we're seeing on the show.
And so, we've been talking a little bit about coaching, and, clearly coaching is a big part of your day. You specifically talk about Finishline coaching. So can you tell us, what exactly is that, and what is the role of Finishline coaching, particularly at the end of the year?
Yeah, this is the time. I mean, our fiscal ends with the calendar, be it mid-November, week before Thanksgiving. This is crunch time for your forecast, and is the contract out? Is there enough time? And so the one-on-ones here at Ambition are very focused on helping reps get unstuck. I think end-of-year coaching really has to be focused on the deals in flight and where the rep feels like they may be potentially stuck. And the way that looks here is, give me an example of where you're stuck. What have you already tried to get unstuck? How might I help you consider another way? The question is, what would you suggest I do to help you get unstuck now? So it's just hey, I'm stuck with Gong. I've already tried to go to Devin, but he's not, responding to my calls, emails, right? You might help me because I saw you're connected to Sheena from your days working at X company. Do you mind sending Sheena a note on my behalf or calling her? And so there's the whole focus. And again, this goes back to A players, is even A players are going to get stuck. They're also going to try something before they get to you, or they should. And then you as a leader have to think, okay, how can I use, even if it's just my title, as lame as that sounds, it works, my connections. We had one the other day for a quick story. We have a rep who's really late stage with a ride sharing company you've all heard about. And he was stuck with IT. And so I messaged another sales leader that is in the sales marketing space. And just like, hey, do you guys by chance work with this ride sharing company? He's like, yeah, this is the rep who closed the deal. So 48 hours later, the reps are both talking to each other. And our rep is able to ask him, hey, did you see a similar hurdle? How long did that take? What might you recommend? And then reciprocating of, hey, who are you trying to get right now? Is there anybody that I've been working or closed in the past that I can help provide guidance? And so I think a misconception is leaders think at the end of the year they have to have all the answers. The reality is part of the job as a leader is to leverage your network to help unstick parts of the deal. And you may not have the lever in each area where someone is stuck, but someone else on the leadership team might. Someone in your professional network, like the example I just gave, might. And again, being able to take a little bit of your ego as the sales leader who knows all, and you definitely don't, but being able to take a step back and say, okay, if it's not me, who is it? And how do I help connect the dots?
Well, that's a big difference, right? There's a difference between like coaching or like knowing the answer and getting a rep there versus kind of like connecting, which is like, putting them in the right path or kind of guiding them to, like you said, the right resource. It sounds like maybe it's just most recent or one of the more common ones is that path. Like, how can I help you source the right information, right, to get a deal unstuck and kind of guide you? Are there other scenarios that you run into commonly of like helping reps get unstuck at the finish line, or like, maybe even specifically for end of year?
So for end of year right now, what you see a lot is that, to use you all as the example, like Devin wants to buy Ambition, but Devin knows in order to get Ambition purchased, he needs Sheena and IT to approve the timeline. Well, maybe Sheena approves it, maybe she doesn't, but procurement is involved, and procurement says, hey, Devin, it's November 18th. We need to wait until mid-December to have this conversation because we work in software. We know software buying end of year is the time.
Yep.
So I know you have this great relationship with Mark, but let's just let this coast for a minute and let's see if we can, position this later in order to find a better deal. And so sometimes getting unstuck is having been there enough to know that, hey, Devin has told us that he's going to buy Ambition. He's told us how this process works. He's also told us that procurement he doesn't have a whole lot of control over, and that ultimately his job is just to get us to that point. And so as a sales leader, there are times, and this sounds counterintuitive to what maybe most sales leaders' advice would be, but where you're having to tell the rep actually to chill, we're okay. I've seen this play before. That conversation is coming. Time won't kill this deal. And let's just sit tight for a minute because Devin is a great champion. He's told us everything that he's trying as hard as we are to get this thing done. And so let's wait for the next step. It's okay.
So it almost sounds like recognizing you're actually not stuck. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I think every rep, we're trained, be the biggest critic of every deal. Yeah. Find every hole in your deal. And that paranoia, I like to push back on that. I'm like, okay, the best salespeople I know aren't the ones who protect every ounce of risk in the deal. The best salespeople I know are the ones who think, how do I get this done? Not how will it not happen? And so, yes, have that healthy amount of risk. But to your point, Devin, sometimes you're not stuck. Sometimes this is just enterprise software sales.
Right.
And the fact that 10 days went by between steps, it isn't the most uncommon thing this late in the year when a buyer is trying to create leverage.
Yeah. Great point. And we use one of the I'll call it procurement software companies. I don't know how much I'm allowed to give away on the show for folks trying to sell to us, but we do use one. If you're in the sales cycle listening, we do use one. But have to fill out a form. Do you want to renew this? If you do, here's kind of give us some information. And I filled it out. I went right to my CSM for this, the software. And I was like, just so you know, the renewal will happen. It's probably going to be painful for you, and I apologize for that. But just know a renewal of some sort will happen. I'll help you however you want. And if you want to bug me, Friday before I log off for updates, I'm happy to. But just know, and you could tell he was like, that stress off his shoulders. Like, okay, great, the verbal's there, the champion's going to help do it. But sometimes you just need that, like you said, that insight. Like it's not stuck. It's just moving slowly, but it will occur.
I wanted to connect the dots a little bit between how we started the conversation, which was about coaching A players, which sounded like it was much more around learning and development and giving those opportunities versus the finish line coaching, which in some ways maybe it's a little bit more hands-on or tactical. It's problem solving in the moment. So do you see those as two different things? Should some of that kind of developmental coaching be happening in the beginning of the year? Is there a better time for it? Just walk us through that a bit.
Yeah. So let's just use a finish line coaching session with an A player. And so my first question is always, what have you already done? And then actually, what do you think we should do? I want to hear, you've thought about this a lot more than I have. What suggestion do you have? And what I find oftentimes is they're typically right. If they're not right on what we should do, they're really close. They're saying I should email that person versus you should call that person, right? And so with an A player in that finish line coaching, there's the ability to let them lead themselves to their own outcome. And there's a trust there that you may not have with a B or a C player in late stage. I am definitely guilty with a B or C player of when they ask me what to do, I just tell them exactly what to do. And it's short-sighted, to be honest. It's more like I don't have time to go through the 20 minutes of self-discovery to get you where you need to be, like go call Sheena right now, and this is what you should ask her.
Right.
And this time of year, I justify it because every minute matters. Whereas if this is in February of next year, I'm going to approach it with the 20 minutes of trying to develop the person in a way where they get their own answer next time without having to come to me. One of the biggest signs of a weak leader, in my opinion, is the leader who has to approve and have every conversation about every deal with their rep. If you're hiring good people, you have to trust them to run in these deals, give them, again, the guidelines of how they can work. But if you're ultimately having to approve each next step, how that next step is said or communicated, that means you haven't enabled your team in a way that they can operate on their own. What happens when you go on vacation? Or what happens when you're suddenly out of the office? Like, you need to build a team that can run itself. And the only way to do that really is to create the self-discovery. But Sheena, Q4, finish line coaching, be your C player, I'll definitely jump on the fact that I directly tell them what to do very quickly.
What I bet too is you could also preface like why before that. Like, hey, you know, usually Devin, my rep, I would walk you through here's how, but like because we're in crunch time, I'm going to give you very direct guidance, and we can revisit and like postmortems or postmortems for one deals, whatever those are called. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, Mark, everyone has their kind of one-on-one, outline plan, right? Maybe it kind of varies from, like you said, A players or rep to rep based on what folks need. But I'm curious, like, we're recording this November 18th. Folks probably listening to this around like early mid-December. If your one-on-ones change as what I call, holiday season, holiday selling, crunch time, if it does change, how do your one-on-ones change, during that time?
So usually I'll tell you about my standard one-on-one, if you will, and then I'll tell you what it looks like in mid-December. The standard one-on-one here on my team is usually 5 to 7 questions. The first question, and I do all my one-on-ones on Mondays and Tuesdays. I try to stack them at the beginning of the week. They're 45 minutes on purpose, so I have 15 minutes to create whatever action plan or deliverable that needs to happen afterwards. But in those 5 to 7 questions, it usually starts with last week's highlights and lowlights. I want to know what happened last week that you really felt like was a success and what was really disappointing. Then I have them call out a deal in what we call as a champion's choice stage. What that means is that someone internally is trying to buy ambition at said company. In that deal, I'm asking them what they like and what concerns them, and how I can help them in the deal. So really there's 4 questions around one deal in that one-on-one. So you got the highlights, lowlights, you're calling out the deal, the 4 questions. And then at the end, I'm asking what else. So my standard coaching session really revolves around highlights, lowlights, picking apart a deal and how I can help them, making sure they're seeing it through the right lens. And then at the end, letting them bring whatever else they would like to talk about. The reason I think this works is it is mostly rep-led. While I'm providing the questions, they're the ones who have written the answers. And when we come to the one-on-one, I've already seen it. I've had a chance to think about it. Like, we get right to it. But the way that changes when you get into late December, as I've already alluded to a little bit around getting unstuck, is that in late December, all you need to talk about is the deals that are going to convert in December. You don't need to talk about last week's highlights and lowlights. All that rep is thinking about is the 3 deals that he or she has dated December 31st, which, by the way, don't date them December 31st. Yeah. Date them December 17th. That's the Friday before Christmas. But they're focused on those deals, and you need to ask them why those deals might not close. If it's that late in the year, you do need to have the approach of what risk still exists. Now, earlier I said, like, be about how you get the deal closed. That's how I feel through, call it 80% of the deal. But when you're there at the end, you need to be thinking about what possible risk still exists. So in the one-on-one in mid-December, it's what do you still forecast here at the end of the year? what potential, like list each deal and what potential risk you see. How can I help you minimize that risk? And then also have or anyone else in the company. Because also mid-December, I hope that anyone will help you get that deal across the line. Is it your head of, I'm talking from a medium-sized company, but is it your head of product? Is it your VP of CS? Well, our CEO is like, sign me up, put me in whatever conversation you need. And I imagine Gong's is too. So when you talk about what's left, what risk still exists, and who can be involved in that, you're de-risking the deal for the rep in a way because you're telling them, hey, do not lose by yourself if you're going to lose. Get me, get the CEO, get head of product, whoever it is. So we are throwing every possible touch point to make sure this future customer knows how important their business is to us. The last thing I'll add here, so we sell to salespeople predominantly. And the last thing I'll add in on this late December deal that has kind of gone cold, it's making you nervous, first thing you're thinking about when you wake up in the morning. What I find myself constantly coaching sales reps on is just humanizing the last ask. We sell to sales leaders. If Devin's the CRO and he's the one signing this, ask Devin if you can forecast this deal in December. Tell Devin that your CRO, which is not me, but my boss, asked if we could count on said customer to execute in December. Mention that you just got out of your one-on-one with your boss and your boss asked. Like, everyone has a boss. Every salesperson has a quota. Since we are selling to salespeople, you need to use those powerful questions that they fully understand,
Right.
As a weapon, frankly, to get honesty and know if you can or cannot forecast in December.
Definitely something I use selling to sales leaders. And I think you can just tweak the question if you're listening to this and you don't sell to salespeople who might not, quote unquote, get the game like we all do, right? But it could be, hey, I was just talking to, my VP Mark, and we were talking about your account, Sheena, and he wanted to know if there's, anything missing that would prevent you from moving forward this month, or do you have everything that you're looking for? Are you fully taken care of, right? You can kind of make it about them, while also kind of like mentioning, we do have this forecasted for you to become a client this month. Mark wanted to make sure you have everything you need. Is there anything missing, right? And then you also start to unravel if there's any like hidden objections in there.
Mm-hmm.
I've got one more on this too. So we do a lot of business and enterprise, just call it like 1,000+ employee accounts. And those in those types of deals where the obstacles are seemingly 10x the mid-market or SMB deals, and this is true, we'll talk about board level deals of like, hey, this partnership is being discussed at a board level. That carries a gravity to it that is very real, let me tell you, as the VP of sales, but it also carries gravity to the person who's considering the investment. Nobody is trying to make you look bad in front of your board.
Right.
Like no one is actually attempting to do that. So if you can use that kind of language in a larger opportunity, it can also be really helpful for, again, humanizing the ask. Because then they're thinking, oh man, Mark's got to like talk to the board about this, and I know this deal is going to happen or isn't going to happen. Let me pick up the phone and give him some more clarity.
Especially if that person interacts with their own board at their company, right?
Yes.
Then they're like, there's a lot of empathy. Like, you know what? I've been caught on my heels in those meetings, and I don't want to project that, or I don't want to give that to anybody.
So, Mark, you've probably seen like a variety of, the quality of coaching, from amazing coaching to folks who maybe could be doing a better job. What do you see that sales leaders often get wrong when it comes to coaching?
The one-on-one is a manager talking at an employee. The manager is the know-it-all who has every answer. I have made this mistake. I started my career at AT&T, led retail teams, and was working with a lot of people in their first sales job. And I was very much like, okay, you got 30 minutes with me. How much knowledge and wisdom can I give you in 30 minutes about how to be a better salesperson? And then they would walk away and probably think, man, who is this kid? Like, and so I've made that mistake. And now as a sales leader, especially working with a higher quality salesperson, if you will, and there's so much value in the rep-led conversation. And that's how people remember what they took from the coaching session, right? People remember what they say. So how do you get them talking about the most important priorities? How do you make the next move their idea? That's how you begin to scale a team who knows what they're doing, whether you're around or not.
How did you realize that you were maybe doing it wrong yourself in those AT&T days?
I had a boss who had been around the block a few times. And what's funny about that is I wanted to show her how great I was at one-on-ones. And so she came and did like a skip level, but it wasn't really a skip level because I was there. And I'm having these conversations, and y'all, I thought I was God's gift to AT&T retail when I was 22, which is so not true. And at the end, she pulls me aside and she's like, Mark, she gave me the old S sandwich, if you will, of like, I really like your coaching. Do you realize they don't talk at all? Like the store is performing, but imagine if you led them this way. Mm-hmm. And that was an eye opener for me. I had always been the type A person who kind of made their own plan and like had the answer. Mm-hmm. And that was how I had gotten to where I was, I guess. And learning that, man, it's so much more powerful if you let them bring the idea. And most of the time they bring the right idea. And especially as you continue to do it because they start to put themselves through the thought process before you even get there. Mm-hmm. That was a big moment for me. And it allowed me to free up time because now I didn't need to answer every question.
Well, the other thing too is when you let them provide that answer, even if you think you do, or if you do have the right or the best answer, by letting them provide it, you can kind of scale of like where they are in terms of how like kind of educated they are. You know what I mean? If it's like, oh, I was way off, I know kind of where you are and how to coach you to get to where I need. Or if you're like 5% off, like you basically got it exactly right. I think that's a good way to also kind of evaluate where folks at and where those kind of skill gaps or maybe critical thinking gaps could be.
We do quick call debriefs here. So like if we're in a demo and we hop off, there's 100% chance myself and the rep are going to do a quick debrief. Mm-hmm. And it's really two questions. What went well? What do you think you could do better? And then I will give some feedback on if they didn't present what they think they could do better. What happens over time is they talk about what went well, and then they basically tell you, I know what you're about to say. That one part where I talked about pricing and just kept talking, I should have just stopped, And you're like, yep, Devin, you're getting it. Like, here we go. We're starting to stack some of these development conversations. Yep. And when they're coaching themselves, that's a huge sign that things are moving in the right direction.
Because the next step is they just do it, right? It's like being told, then telling you, I know I should have done that. And the next one is just doing it. So definitely levels.
Mark, we're going to ask you one final question, which we ask all of our guests, which is how would you describe sales in one word?
Oh, man. How would I describe sales in one word? My one word is people. At the end of the day, I love process. When we're scaling companies, we all obsess over process. Mm-hmm. But the reality is sales is still very much a people game. It is solving a problem. It is taking care of a pain for a person or persons. And while I know there are a lot of people out there who think, oh, sales, like eventually it'll all be automated and then I won't have to talk to that person. Like, get out of here. It is a people game. And I think it'll continue to be the way sales teams differentiate themselves is through really good people who tell them how it is, whether they're a great fit or not a great fit, and become trusted advisor is so overused, but it is a good description of the best salespeople are able to make suggestions that improve upon what they're already trying to buy. Mm-hmm. And For better or worse, I will die on that hill that it is a people game.
I love it.
I like it. Well, hey, we talked about coaching for the last half an hour, so I mean that's right on the money, right on the money. Mark, like I said before, glad we could reconnect. Thank you for sharing your expertise on finish line coaching with us. Best of luck to you and all of our listeners as you close out the quarter.
Thanks so much for having me. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.